Glory and dreams Liu Cixin, the postponed Olympic Games morning light had already filled half the sky, yet the land of the Republic of West Asia still lay under darkness, as if the night that had just passed had hardened into a black layer of sediment over the earth.
Mr. Grant drove a small truck loaded with garbage out through the gate of the United Nations Humanitarian Relief Base. The West Asian workers hired by the base had all left, so for the past few days the remaining staff had had to take out their own trash. This would be the last time. Tomorrow, the final United Nations personnel left in West Asia would withdraw, and the day after tomorrow, or perhaps a little later, war would descend on this country again.
Grant stopped the truck beside a nearby dump, climbed down, grabbed a garbage bag, and threw it out. When he lifted the second bag, he held it suspended in the air for several seconds. In this dead-still world, he saw the only moving thing, a tiny black dot on the horizon, trembling slightly, as if constantly denying that it belonged to the black earth. Against the pale, brightening dawn, it looked like a sunspot.
The sound pulled Grant's attention back to what was near him. He saw several dark shapes moving toward the garbage bag he had just thrown down, like stones on the ground coming alive. They were scavengers who came every day, men and women, old and young. After 17 years of blockade, this country was starving to death.
Grant raised his head again and could now make out that the distant black dot was a running human body. Against the brighter dawn, he thought it looked like a little insect dancing in front of a flame.
A disturbance broke out among the scavengers. Someone had found half a sausage. He stuffed it into his mouth and chewed with abandon, while the others stared blankly at him. They froze for a few seconds, but only for a few seconds, then went back to carefully searching through the torn garbage bags. In minds numbed by hunger, food in the trash shone brighter than the sun that was about to rise.
Grant looked up again. The runner was closer now, and from the shape of the body, he could see it was female. She was thin, and in Grant's third impression, she seemed like a young sapling swaying in the morning light. When she was close enough for him to hear her panting, he still could not hear her footsteps. She ran to the dump, her legs gave way, and she fell sitting on the ground. She was a teenage girl, dark-skinned, wearing a worn athletic vest and shorts.
Her eyes caught Grant. They were astonishingly large in her small face, making her look like some nocturnal creature. Unlike the deadened eyes of the other scavengers, something burned in these eyes in the morning light, a mixture of longing, pain, and fear. Her whole existence seemed concentrated in those eyes. Beside them, her tiny face and her body, thin as a stick, seemed only like withered leaves attached to a fruit. Pale-faced, she panted with a sound like wind from far away. A white film of dry skin covered her lips. One scavenger muttered something to her. Grant tried to catch the sounds of the West Asian language and roughly understood.
Sini, you are late again. Do not expect anyone to save food for you.
The girl called Sini lowered her level gaze to the ripped-open garbage bag. It seemed hard for her, as if something in the infinite distance were powerfully attracting her. But hunger soon asserted itself, and like the others, she began searching the trash for food. By now, almost all the scraps had been picked clean. She found only an open tin of fish, pulled out a few fish bones, chewed them, and swallowed with difficulty. She tried to get up and search again, but collapsed beside the dump. Grant went over and lifted her. Her sweat-soaked body was unbelievably light and soft, like a cloth sack lying across his arms and knees.
It is hunger.
She has been like this many times.
Someone said this to Grant in fluent English. Grant gently set Sini down on the ground, stood, took a bottle of milk from the cab, crouched and fed her. Even unconscious, Sini quickly sensed the taste of milk and drank in great gulps. "Where is your home?"
When he saw that Sini had come around a little, Grant asked loudly in clumsy West Asian, "She is mute."
Does she live far from here?
Grant looked up and asked the English-speaking scavenger, who wore glasses and had a tangled beard. No, she lives in the refugee camp nearby, but every morning she runs from here to the river, then runs back. The river, that is more than 10 kilometers round trip. Is she mentally ill?
No. She is training. Seeing that Grant was even more confused, the scavenger added, "She is the marathon champion of the Republic of West Asia." Oh. But this country has not had national athletic competitions for many years, has it? That is what people say anyway.
Sini had recovered somewhat and was holding the bottle herself, drinking the remaining milk. Grant crouched beside her, sighed, shook his head, and said,
Yes. Everywhere there are people living inside dreams. I used to be one of them. The scavenger said, Your English is very good. I was a professor of English and American literature at the University of West Asia. 17 years of sanctions and blockade made us lose all our dreams, and in the end, made us what we are now. He pointed toward the other scavengers still searching through the garbage. Sini's collapse seemed not to have drawn their attention. My only dream now is that you throw out some of your leftover wine. Grant looked at Sini sadly and said, If she keeps doing this, she will kill herself.
"What difference does it make?" The professor of English and American literature shrugged indifferently. "When war breaks out again in 2 or 3 days, all of you will be gone. International relief will be cut off. Every road will be blocked. We will either be bombed to death or starve to death."
Let us hope the war ends quickly. I think it will. The people of West Asia are tired of war. This country has already fallen apart. That is true. All we want is food and a chance to stay alive. Look at him. The professor pointed to a disheveled young man, searching intently in the garbage heap.
He is a deserter. At that moment, Sini, still leaning in the crook of Grant's arm, raised one withered arm and pointed at the white temporary buildings of the United Nations relief base not far away, gesturing with both hands.
It looks as if she wants to go in, the professor said. Can she hear?
Grant asked. Seeing the professor nod, he turned to Sini and gestured with one hand, speaking to her in awkward West Asian.
You cannot. You cannot go in. I will give you some more food. Tomorrow, do not come. Tomorrow we leave.
Sini wrote several West Asian words in the sand with her finger. The professor looked at them and said, She wants to go in and watch the Olympic opening ceremony on your television. He shook his head sadly. This child is beyond saving.
The Olympic opening has been postponed by 1 day.
Grant said, because of the war. What? You know nothing about it?
Grant looked around in surprise and said, What do the Olympics have to do with us? The professor shrugged again.
Just then a hoarse engine interrupted them. An old bus of a kind that could only be seen in West Asia came along the road and stopped beside the dump. A man jumped down from it. He looked to be in his 50s with graying hair, and he shouted to the group.
Is Sini here? Widia Sini!
Sini tried to stand, but her legs gave out and she fell sitting on the ground again. The man came over and saw her. Child, what has become of you? Do you still know me? Sini nodded.
Where are you from?
The professor looked at the man and asked.
I am Krell, Director of the National Sports Bureau.
The man answered, then helped Sini up from the ground.
This country still has a sports bureau?
Grant asked in surprise, supporting Sini with one hand. Krell looked at the rising sun and spoke each word distinctly.
The Republic of West Asia has everything, sir. At least it will have everything.
With that, he helped Sini toward the bus. After they boarded, Krell looked at Sini, lying limp in the worn seat, and remembered how he had met the girl a year earlier.
That evening after work, Krell left the old 3-story building of the Sports Bureau and wearily opened the door of his old Volga. Someone caught his arm from behind. When he turned, he saw Sini. She gestured that she wanted to get into his car. He was surprised, but the sincerity in her eyes made her trustworthy. So he let her in and drove in the direction she pointed.
Oh, are you West Asian? Krell's question was reasonable. People who train for certain sports for a long time leave distinct marks on themselves, not only in body shape, but also in mental state. Although Sini wore the loose robe common among West Asian women, Krell's expert eye immediately saw those marks in her. But he could not believe that in a country trapped for more than 10 years in poverty and hunger, anyone was still training for that kind of sport.
Sini nodded. Following Sini's directions, the car reached the Capitol Stadium. After they got out, Sini wrote a line on the ground.
Please watch me run a marathon.
At the starting point of the stadium track, Sini took off her long robe, revealing the old athletic shirt and shorts she would continue wearing afterward. When Krell signaled the timing to begin, she started running with light steps. By then, Krell was already certain that this child was rare material for distance running, and that certainty made sorrow rise in his heart.
The largest stadium in the Republic of West Asia, with room for 80,000 people, was now utterly abandoned. Weeds and dust covered the track. On the west side was a huge gap, blown open by a heavy bomb in some air raid from some forgotten year. The setting sun was sinking through the gap, casting a blood-colored afterglow onto the stands above the stadium's vast shadow.
Before the war, sport in the Republic of West Asia had known a glorious age. But the war 17 years ago, and the blockade and sanctions that had continued since, had turned sport into an enormous luxury. State investment in sport had been compressed to the minimum, only enough to send a few athletes sporadically to international competitions for foreign propaganda. In recent years, as the country's conditions of survival grew harsher, even that investment disappeared. The athletes scattered to unknown places. The National Sports Bureau had only 4 employees left and could be abolished at any time.
The sun set in the west, and a dim yellow full moon rose in the east. Sini ran lap after lap, now disappearing into shadow, now entering the moonlight like water. In the vast ruin, desolate as an ancient Roman amphitheater, the sound of her light footsteps echoed. Krell felt that she was a phantom from a vanished golden age. In those moonlit ruins, time flowed backward, and a feeling long since lost returned to his heart. Tears streamed down his face.
When moonlight lit most of the stadium, Sini finished her 105th lap and reached the finish. She did not do any recovery exercises. She simply stood far away, quietly looking at Krell. In the moonlight, she looked like a slender statue on the track. 2 hours, 16 minutes, 30 seconds. Considering the difference between inside and outside roads, add another 3 minutes. And it is still the best national result so far.
Sini smiled. One trait of marathon runners is a blank expression, caused by enduring, monotonous physical expenditure for a long time in training and competition. But Krell found Sini's smile in the moonlight moving, and that smile cut his heart open like a knife. He stood dazed, turning himself into another statue, and did not come back to himself until Cinny's breathing had calmed like a receding tide. Then he put his watch back on his wrist and said softly,
"Child, you were born at the wrong time." Sini nodded calmly. Krell bent to pick up the robe on the ground, walked over and handed it to Sini. "I will take you home. It is dark. Your parents will be worried."
Sini gestured, and Krell understood. She was saying that she had no parents and no home. She took the clothes, turned, and walked away, soon vanishing into the huge shadow of the stadium.
The bus drove toward the suburbs. Sini, limp and weak in her seat, swayed with the bumps, exhaustion and frailty making her drowsy. Then a sentence from someone in the back seat jolted her awake. "Sari, how did you get yourself into prison?"
Sini straightened and looked back. She saw the man called Sari. She recognized him at once, but could not believe that this wretched figure had once been the brightest sports star of the Republic of West Asia. Alex Sari was one of the 3 West Asian athletes who had won medals in international competitions during the blockade. 4 years earlier, he had won gold in men's double trap at the World Shooting Championships, becoming a national hero. Sini still clearly remembered the radiant image of him riding through Central Avenue in an open car. The Sari before her was nothing but skin and bones, his pale face crossed by several scars. Wrapped in a filthy prison uniform, he shivered on this not cold morning.
Krell said.
He became the bodyguard of a smuggling boss. They wanted his marksmanship.
I did not want to starve to death,
Sari said. But you nearly starved to death anyway. When free citizens cannot get enough to eat, what do you think prison is like? People die there every day of hunger or disease. You are not far from it. Director, you saved my life by bailing me out. But why? Where are we going?
To the airport. As for what we are going to do, I do not know. We were simply ordered to gather former national team members from every sport.
The bus stopped, and several more people got on. Like most West Asians, they were sallow and thin, their clothes shabby. Some kept coughing. Hunger and poverty were written plainly on their faces. Unlike ordinary people, they were all very tall, and that height made their haggardness even more striking. Bent over inside the bus, they looked like a row of large shrimp long out of the water and withered dry. Sini quickly recognized them as former players from the national men's basketball team.
"Hello, everyone. How have you been all these years?" Krell greeted them. "Before we have the strength to tell you, Director, let us eat breakfast first." Another voice cut in.
Yes. As a senior official, you cannot know what hunger feels like. You still live off sport, but what are we supposed to eat? Our daily ration is enough for only 1 meal, another added, and even that meal is almost gone. Humanitarian relief has stopped. Yet another voice said,
"Never mind. Wait a little longer. Once the war breaks out, there will be human meat on the black market again."
While the men's basketball players complained all at once, Sini looked them over one by one and found that the person she most wanted to see had not come. Krell asked the question for her. "Where is Murad?" Yes, Gari, Murad, the Jordan of the Republic of West Asia. He is dead. Been dead half a year.
Krell did not seem surprised. Oh, and Yuxia? Sini struggled to recall the name, then remembered that she had been a former national women's basketball player, Murad's wife. They died together. My God, what happened?
You should ask what happened to the world. They were like us. They knew nothing except basketball. These years gave them only hunger. But they should not have had a child. The situation worsened just after the baby was born, and rations were cut in half again. The child lived only 3 months, dead of malnutrition, or rather starved to death. On the night the child died, the two of them made noise until midnight, arguing for a while, crying for a while, then going quiet. Then they actually started cooking. The two of them ate silently and finally had their first full meal in years. You know how much they could eat. They ate up the ration for the second half of the month. At dawn, neighbors found them dead in bed together. No one knew what poison they had taken.
The whole bus fell silent. It was not until the bus stopped again and one more person got on that someone said, "Ah, at last, someone who is not starving."
The newcomer was a gorgeous young woman. Her dyed red hair burned like a flame. She wore heavy eyeshadow and lipstick, and her clothes were gaudy and revealing, in sharp contrast to the poverty in the bus.
Probably more than just not starving. She is living very well.
Someone else said, "Not necessarily. The capital is a city of hunger now. How good can business be in the red light district?"
Oh, no, you pauper.
The woman gave the speaker a careless, rippling laugh and said,
I mainly serve the United Nations peacekeeping troops.
A few laughs sounded in the bus, but they were quickly drowned by a fit of violent coughing.
Lately, you ought to have at least some sense of shame.
Krell said sternly. Oh, Uncle Krell, shame or no shame, worms grow on everyone after they starve to death. The young woman waved this off and sat down beside Sini.
Sini stared at her with wide eyes. God, was this Wendell Lele? Was this the pure and beautiful girl who had won bronze at the World Gymnastics Championships, the radiant flower of West Asian sport?
The rest of the journey passed in silence. 20 minutes later, the bus drove onto the apron of the capital airport. 2 buses had already arrived, carrying former national team athletes. Together with this bus, there were more than 70 people, including a men's basketball team, a men's football team, and athletes from 11 other events.
At the start of the runway stood a huge Boeing passenger jet. During the decade-plus in which West Asian airspace had been designated a no-fly zone, it was clearly the largest and most luxurious aircraft ever to have landed at this airport. Krell led the athletes of the Republic of West Asia to the plane. Several foreigners in suits stepped out of the cabin. When they reached the middle of the boarding stairs, one of them waved and shouted something to the crowd below. The athletes recognized in astonishment that he was the president of the International Olympic Committee. But what shocked them most was the sentence Krell translated,
"Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the international community, I have come to the Republic of West Asia to take you to the 29th Olympic Games. Beijing, so this was Beijing."
Sini sighed when the motorcade entered the city. This distant city had once had nothing to do with her, a poor, hungry girl from the Republic of West Asia. But for several years, the Olympic Games had made Beijing a holy place in her heart. Sini knew very little about Beijing, only a dimly colored martial arts film she had seen as a child. In her imagination, Beijing was an ancient, quiet city. She could not connect that city with the grand and magnificent Olympics.
Countless times she had dreamed of the Olympics and of Beijing, but never had the two appeared in the same dream. In some dreams, she swept like a bird over the sea of people in a magnificent Olympic arena. In others, she walked through the labyrinthine alleys, and beneath the old city walls of the Beijing she imagined searching for the Olympic Stadium, never finding it.
Sini stared out the window with wide eyes, looking for the hutongs and walls she had imagined. What entered her eyes was a new forest of modern high-rises, their ranks shining white in the sunlight, like newly unwrapped toys, like enormous pale plants that had shot into the sky overnight. Only then, in Sini's mind, did the Olympics and Beijing join perfectly together.
The excitement of arriving in a new world broke through like the sun showing for an instant through clouds, casting a line of light into Sini's heart. But the gloomy clouds soon covered everything again.
Contrary to the assumptions of major media around the world, when the athletes from the Republic of West Asia learned that they would attend the Olympics, they showed no excitement or joy. Like other West Asians, more than 10 years of suffering had stripped them of any faith in fate and given them a numb calm before every accident, good or bad. Their first reaction was always to tighten their shells and protect themselves. After hearing the news, no one even asked a question, not even the obvious questions, such as how they could enter the Olympics without any qualifiers. They simply boarded the plane in silence, numb and sensitive at once, watching the development of events.
After Sini entered the spacious, empty cabin, she chose a window seat and kept watching what happened there. She saw the IOC president summon Krell and several West Asian delegation officials into first class. More than an hour passed with no movement. The athletes also waited quietly in silence until Krell finally came out. He said nothing, only held a sheet of paper and checked a list. Dozens of eyes fixed on his face. It was calm. That calm was the first sign, and it told Sini that something was wrong.
Soon, her sensitive eyes discovered the second sign. When Krell returned to first class with the list, he used his free hand to open the closed cabin door. Although that hand groped for a long time without finding the handle, his eyes still stared straight ahead and never looked down, as if he had gone blind for a moment. Then Sini confirmed her premonition.
Something was wrong.
Everyone ate a full meal in the cabin. Each person ate 2 or 3 airline meals, and the appetite of these West Asians astonished the Chinese flight attendants. Then the plane took off. Through the porthole, Sini watched a sea of clouds quickly cover the land of West Asia. The cloud sea rarely parted during the whole flight, as if hiding an enormous mystery below.
After the plane landed at Beijing Airport, they waited a full 2 hours before the West Asian sports delegation, now in matching uniforms, left the cabin. When they entered the arrivals hall, a storm of flashbulbs immediately made them unable to open their eyes. The hall was packed black with reporters, who crowded desperately around the delegation like starving wolves seeing prey. Yet they carefully kept about 2 meters away, so the delegation walked inside a small moving circle of open space, as if an invisible force field around them repelled the reporters. What unnerved Sini and the other West Asians even more was that no one asked questions. The hall held only the clicking of flashbulbs and the rustle of shoes scraping the floor as people pressed together.
When she walked out of the hall, Sini heard a roar in the air, looked up, and saw 3 small helicopters hovering overhead. Whether for security or filming, she did not know. Only 2 buses carried the delegation, yet more than a dozen police cars escorted them, along with an armed police motorcycle team. As the vehicles entered the highway from the airport to the city, Sini and the other West Asian athletes discovered something even more shocking. The road had been cleared and closed. Not a single car could be seen.
Something was truly wrong.
By the time they reached the Olympic Village, night had fallen. As the West Asian athletes got off the buses, their doubts turned into fear. The Olympic Village was deathly still. Most of the dozens of neat apartment buildings for athletes were dark. As they walked toward the only building with lights on, Sini noticed, in the center of a small square in the distance, a row of tall flagpoles without flags, like a long row of dead trees in winter. Outside, city lights brightened half the night sky, and faint noise drifted in, making the strange silence of the village even sharper. Sini shivered. The place reminded her of a tomb.
In the reception hall of the athletes' apartment building, Krell, as head of the delegation, gave the athletes a brief speech.
Please go to your rooms. Dinner will be delivered to your rooms in 1 hour. No one is allowed to go out tonight. Rest well. Tomorrow morning at 9, we will represent the Republic of West Asia in the opening ceremony of the 29th Olympic Games.
Sini shared an elevator with Krell and Sari. She heard Sari ask the delegation head in a low voice, "You really do not intend to tell us the truth? Is the peace window idea really going to happen? Tomorrow you will understand everything. We should at least let everyone sleep well for one night."
Peace Window Sini looked up at the majestic Olympic Stadium. For a brief moment, happiness and intoxication covered her tension and fear. Whatever happened over the next few days, she had reached the holy place in every athlete's dreams. That was enough for one lifetime.
But her fear of what was coming did not lessen. Everything she had experienced over the past 2 days increasingly resembled a gloomy and bizarre dream. In the morning, the motorcade of the Republic of West Asia left the Olympic Village for the Olympic Stadium. Along the broad road connecting the two places, crowds stood shoulder to shoulder, but Sini saw no flowers, flags, or balloons, no laughter or cheering. Tens of thousands of people watched the motorcade pass in collective silence, wearing the same grave expression. The feeling that had chilled Sini yesterday appeared again. She thought it was like a funeral.
Outside the Olympic Stadium, the space was very open, with 2 stern security lines. As the motorcade passed, the armed police soldiers forming those lines saluted in perfect order. The motorcade stopped at the stadium's east gate. After the athletes got off, delegation head Krell assembled them into a square formation. Sini stood in the front row. She searched carefully for any sound from inside the stadium, but heard nothing. Inside the huge building was complete silence.
Krell took a broad national flag of the Republic of West Asia from the bus. He called Sari and 2 other relatively accomplished athletes out of the line and handed each of them 1 corner. When he searched the formation for a 4th person, Layli, standing in the front row, stepped out herself and took the last corner from Krell's hand. But Krell shook his head, pulled the flag out of Layli's hand, and gave it to a female athlete he chose at random. This enormous humiliation made Layli's face flush red. She glared angrily at the delegation head for several seconds, then finally turned and went back into the line.
The 4 athletes spread the flag. The Beijing breeze raised ripples across its surface. Beside the flag, Krell spoke solemnly to the athletes' formation.
Children of West Asia, hold yourselves high. Now we represent our suffering motherland and enter the main arena of the 29th Olympic Games.
Led by the flag, the athletes' formation of the Republic of West Asia began marching and soon entered the tall corridor of the stadium's east gate. The corridor was long, like a tunnel. Sini walked in the front row with the other athletes, all of them staring at the entrance ahead as it drew closer and closer. Her heart pounded. In her mind, beyond that entrance, lay another time and space, another unknowable fate and life waiting for her.
Even mentally prepared, when Sini passed through the entrance and saw the full stadium, her whole body froze. She only moved forward mechanically under the push of the formation behind her.
The only way to avoid collapse was to hold on to the feeling that had covered her for 2 days. This was a nightmare. What she now saw proved it powerfully.
They were facing a completely empty stadium.
The 9 o'clock sun lit half of the immense stadium. The West Asians seemed to be marching inside a basin cut off from the world, a desolate place where only their footsteps echoed. After the dizzy shock passed, Sini saw movement on the far side of the broad field. She soon made out another athlete's formation marching toward them. That formation, too, was led by a large flag carried by 4 athletes, and in the sunlight, Sini recognized the stars and stripes. Unlike the usual chaotic entrance of Olympic teams, the American athletes' formation was extremely orderly, rising and falling as a single square block with a solemn rhythm, like an ancient Roman legion on the attack.
At the center of the field, the 2 formations came within a few dozen meters of each other, then began to turn, finally facing a simple rostrum and stopping. Everything fell into silence, as if time itself had ceased to flow.
A man walked from one side of the field toward the rostrum. His monotonous footsteps echoed among the empty stands like a terrifying countdown. The newcomer was not the president of the International Olympic Committee, but the Secretary General of the United Nations. The thin Brazilian old man slowly mounted the rostrum, gazed at the 2 national formations in the distance, and remained silent for half a minute before he spoke. Through the enormous sound system, his voice seemed to come from the whole vault of the sky.
The 29th Olympic Games will be attended by only 2 countries, the United States of America and the Republic of West Asia. It will take the place of the war about to break out between these 2 nations.
If the United States wins, the Republic of West Asia must fulfill the terms of the final ultimatum. This country will be completely disarmed and divided into 3 independent nations, and war criminals in the former West Asian government will be tried by an international tribunal.
If the Republic of West Asia wins, the war will be halted. The United States and allied forces now in an attack posture against West Asia will all withdraw. The United Nations will cancel its economic sanctions against the Republic of West Asia and welcome it back into the international community.
The Secretary General turned his gaze toward the West Asian athletes' formation. You can predict that in these Olympic Games, the Republic of West Asia is certain to lose. But please also note another fact. If war breaks out, the Republic of West Asia is likewise certain to lose, and then both sides, especially your country, will pay in blood.
Perhaps you think these Olympic Games are only an excuse for the Republic of West Asia to surrender. That is not so. Take an extreme example. If the West Asian sports delegation loses to the United States by only 1 gold medal, then although West Asia will still be deemed defeated, the result will be very different. The country will not be partitioned. The current government may continue to exist, and a standing army may be retained. All West Asia would have to do is destroy its biological and chemical weapons and pay war reparations amounting to only 1/3 of the ultimatum's demand. Of course, this situation is also unlikely. But every gold medal won by a West Asian athlete in any event can win certain rights for a defeated West Asia.
The agreement reached through extremely difficult negotiations between the United States and West Asia under the United Nations framework has detailed terms for all this. And for West Asia, hope of winning gold is not completely absent. Alaksari and Wendolele, for example, have certain advantages in shooting and gymnastics, respectively.
The Secretary General lifted his gaze from the West Asian athletes' formation and looked up at Beijing's summer sky. This is the first implementation of the United Nations Peace Window Plan, a great experiment by humanity in the new millennium to eliminate war.
The name of the Peace Window Plan comes from the respected Mr. Bill Gates. At the arrival of the new century, in order to put Microsoft's wisdom and wealth to a greater use, Mr. Gates led a grand software project to develop a giant simulation program, one that could digitally reproduce wars of every scale on supercomputers with realistic fidelity, eventually replacing real wars between nations with digital wars. This software was named Peace Window. As everyone knows, the idea failed.
First, present software technology is still far from capable of comprehensively simulating the extreme complexity of modern war. More importantly, under present international political conditions, the input of initial data into the software and the belligerent nation's recognition of the simulation results are both insurmountable obstacles. Although the plan failed after enormous investment, the seed of thought planted by Mr. Gates took root, sprouted, and quickly grew. It gave us a new direction for thinking about war. If humanity cannot eliminate war in a short time, then at least it can make war proceed in another, less harmful way, one that respects life.
Thus, with the unanimous approval of the international community, the United Nations restarted the Peace Window Plan. This is the Apollo moon landing of human society, in sociology and international politics. Over the past 5 years, countless politicians, sociologists, legal scholars, ethicists, natural scientists, military strategists, and people from many other fields in many countries have contributed their wisdom to this great plan.
The key to Peace Window is to find a substitute for war. It must satisfy 2 conditions. First, it must faithfully reflect the comprehensive national power of the countries at war. Second, it must conduct the simulation under rules accepted by the belligerents and the international community. The researchers soon thought of the Olympic Games. The level of a single sport, such as football, has little relation to a nation's political, economic, and military strength. But the many sports of the Olympic Games, taken as a whole, can quite accurately reflect a nation's comprehensive power.
At the same time, sport, as one of humanity's oldest activities, has already established a complete set of competition rules recognized by all humankind, and the Olympic Games are to date the largest and most influential human gathering in the world. This makes the Olympics the ideal tool for simulating war.
The Olympic sages of ancient Greece and Coubertin of the last century could never have dreamed that the Olympic Games they founded would one day have such great significance for humanity. And you, people engaged in what was originally such pure sport, could never have imagined that one day you would suddenly shoulder such a grave mission. But history has pushed you here. Please do not evade it. 1,000 years from now, when people look back, this will be the greatest moment in human history. And you, the pioneers of Peace Window, will enter the annals of human civilization.
At this moment, 2 more people walked along the track toward the rostrum. One was the president of the International Olympic Committee. The other, astonishingly, was a soldier in camouflage, carrying a burning torch with 4 stars on his shoulders. After he came onto the rostrum, he spoke in a low voice.
I am George West, General of the United States Army and Commander of U.S. forces in the West Asian Theater. In 5 minutes, the final ultimatum will expire. Without Peace Window, I would order the first wave of airstrikes against the Republic of West Asia. But now, I will light the Olympic flame."
Then he saluted the Olympic flag that had just been raised, turned, and mounted the long steps toward the great torch. He climbed with the steady gait of a soldier, his upper body and the torch in his hand remaining perfectly straight. At last, in the athlete's eyes, he became a small black dot beneath the enormous Olympic cauldron. General West raised the torch in his hand to the whole world, held it solemnly still for several seconds, and lit the Olympic flame.
The athletes heard a dull roar. The Olympic flame burned into the blue sky. There were no cheers, no flocks of doves. In the deathly silence, only that ancient great fire roared, like a vast wind sweeping across the firmament. The Olympic Games of two countries.
After the opening ceremony, all events began. Among the first competitions, the most watched was men's basketball, the hastily assembled national team of the Republic of West Asia against the American Dream Team. Unlike the opening ceremony, the stands were packed with spectators, most of them reporters. Sports reporters were only a small minority. Most were war correspondents who had rushed over from the West Asian front. Unlike any basketball game before, no one shouted and few even spoke. The game proceeded in silence. Only the thump of the ball on the floor and the squeak of shoes could be heard. By the end of the first half, no one was looking at the scoreboard anymore.
The basketball spirits of the Dream Team flew lightly over the court, like several black birds, as if dancing a dream dance to some inaudible, graceful music. The West Asian team were only impurities mixed into that beautiful dance, trying to disturb it, but the dream dance seemed not to feel their existence and flowed on as smoothly as a river of mercury. At halftime, the elderly coach of the West Asian team waved his bony fist, coughing hoarsely, and spoke to the players whose bodies and spirits were nearly exhausted.
Do not collapse, children. Do not let them pity us.
But they were pitied all the same. Halfway through the second half, many spectators could not bear to watch and got up to leave. When the final gong sounded, the Dream Team's black basketball dancers left the court. The West Asian players still stood motionless where they were, like sand left behind after the tide withdrew. After a long time, the center finally came back to himself, crouched on the ground, and burst into tears. Another player ran beneath the basket and weakly vomited sour fluid in great gulps.
In later events, the Republic of West Asia suffered complete defeat in every sport. This was expected, but no one had imagined the defeats would be so dreadful. In fact, even in the post-war blockade years, West Asian sport had retained some strength. But as conditions worsened in recent years, the government had no attention to spare for sport, and the barely surviving commercial sports clubs had all vanished. The athletes attending these Olympic Games had had no training for 3 or 4 years. At the same time, most had no skills outside sport and had fallen among the poorest people in West Asia's years of suffering. Years of hunger and disease had left them without even the basic physique of athletes.
The Olympic schedule had passed more than halfway in gloom. Polls now showed that even American spectators hoped to see a miracle from the West Asian athletes. People placed their hope for that miracle on 2 West Asians, Layli and Sari. The whole world waited for their appearances.
Yet in the gymnastics competition that followed, Layli disappointed the world. Her technique was still fairly skilled, but her stamina and strength were gone. She made repeated errors, and even on the balance beam, her strongest event, she fell twice. She could not compete with the American team's gymnastics angels, agile as colored springs. Before the final gymnastics event began, on the way into the arena, Sini heard Layli talking with her coach.
You really plan to do the Kamal and vault?
The coach asked.
You have never fully completed it before, and the uneven bars are not your strongest event.
This time, I will complete it.
Layli said coldly. Do not be foolish. Even if you get a perfect score in the uneven bars optional routine, so what? The gap between my score and the American girl's scores will be smaller.
And what of that? Listen to me. Do the routine I designed. Finish it steadily. There is no meaning in risking your life now. Layli gave a cold laugh. Do you really care about my life? To tell the truth, I do not even care about it myself.
The competition began. When Layli leaped onto the uneven bars, Sini immediately saw that she had become another person. Some invisible shackle on her had disappeared. The competition was no longer a mission for her, but a way to release pain. She flew between the bars, her movements growing more and more frenzied. Rare sounds of admiration rose from the stands, but all the gymnastics experts in the arena stood with terror on their faces. The beautiful American gymnastics angels huddled together in alarm. They all knew that this West Asian girl was gambling with her life.
When she reached the difficult Commandland vault, Layli was completely immersed in her madness. She completed a straight-body 1,080-degree somersault in the air, but missed when catching the low bar to return to the high bar. She fell beneath the low bar at a 45-degree angle, head down. From the first row of the stands, Sini heard the crisp crack of a spine breaking.
Krell, holding a West Asian flag, chased after the stretcher and tucked one corner of the flag into Layli's hand. It was the same flag that had led the athletes of the Republic of West Asia in the opening ceremony. Layli gripped that corner tightly. She did not know what she was holding. Her vacant eyes stared at the sky. Her pale face twitched continuously from the agony. Blood flowed from the corner of her mouth, dripped to the ground, then stained the flag, dragging along the floor.
There is one thing we may not have thought of, the president of the International Olympic Committee told reporters. When athletes become soldiers, sport can also bleed.
In fact, the great hope placed on Layli was largely the result of media hype. Layli's excellence was only relative. Even if she performed beyond herself, her strength was far inferior to the American team. Sari was different. He was a true world champion, and compared with other events, several years without training affected a shooter relatively less. Although the United States was a shooting powerhouse and very strong in Sari's men's clay target event, having broken the skeet world record at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, after winning bronze in the event at the 2000 Sydney Olympics, its level had stagnated.
The athlete competing this time, James Graff, had lost to Sari at the World Shooting Championships 4 years earlier and won only bronze. Therefore, the Republic of West Asia had a strong hope of taking this gold medal, which would bring a climax to the final afternoon of these Olympic Games.
For the last stretch of road to the shooting range, Sari was carried high by the West Asians. The athletes of the West Asian delegation cheered around him. By then, he had become their god. The crowding television reporters let the whole world see this scene. If anyone still did not know the background, they would surely have thought West Asia had already won the entire Olympic Games. At the far other end of the Asian continent, the 30 million citizens of the Republic of West Asia gathered before televisions and radios, waiting for their only hero to give them their final consolation. But Sari remained calm, his face expressionless.
At the entrance to the shooting range, Krell spoke solemnly to Sari, who had just been set down.
Of course you know the meaning of this match. If we win at least one gold medal, and thereby win a little right for the post-war country, then this virtual war will have a completely different meaning for West Asians. Sari nodded.
and said coldly,
So the condition I have put to the state for competing is perfectly reasonable. I want $5 million.
Sari's words were like a basin of ice water, extinguishing at once the passion that surrounded him. Everyone stared at him in shock.
Sari, are you insane?
Krell asked in a low voice. I am perfectly sane. Compared with the benefits I will bring the country, I am not asking much. This money is only so I can spend the rest of my life quietly in a place I like. After you win the gold medal, the state will consider giving you a reward.
Mr. Krell, do you really think this country, which is about to disappear, has any credibility left? No. I want it now, or I refuse to compete. Understand this, if I win gold, I will be a world star. If I withdraw, I will also become a hero who refused to serve a dictatorship. In the West, the latter is worth even more.
Sari and Krell stared at each other for a long time. At last, Krell yielded and looked away. All right, please wait a moment. Then he pushed out through the crowd, took out his phone at a distance, and made a call. Sari, this is treason! Someone in the West Asian delegation shouted.
My father died for the country. He was killed in the war 17 years ago when I was 8. My mother and I received only 1,200 West Asian yuan from the government as compensation. After that, prices soared. That little money was not enough for us to eat our fill for 2 weeks.
Sari pulled from his shoulders the national flag the other West Asian athletes had draped over him. Holding it in his hand, he shouted his question.
Country. What is a country? If it is a loaf of bread, how big is it? If it is a coat, how warm is it? If it is a house, can it shelter us from wind and rain? The rich people of West Asia fled abroad long ago to hide from the war. Only we paupers are left, waiting to die inside the patriotic myth woven by the government.
By then, Krell had finished the call. He pushed through the crowd and came to Sari. I have asked for instructions. Sari, you are fulfilling the obligation of a West Asian citizen. The government cannot pay you this money. Good. Sari nodded and stuffed the flag into Krell's arms.
The call went all the way to the president. He said that if a country has only mercenaries to fight for it, then it has no need to continue existing. Sari said nothing more. He turned and walked away. Excited reporters swarmed after him.
With Krell holding the flag at the center, the West Asian delegation stood in silence for a long time, as if mourning something. After an unknown length of time, gunshots sounded inside the shooting range. James Graff was winning the easiest gold medal in Olympic history. The gunshots gradually brought the West Asians back to reality. Without prior agreement, their gazes focused on one person. The large group of reporters who had followed Sari also ran back, aiming hundreds of lenses at that person.
Liu Cixin would compete in the final event of these Olympic Games, the women's marathon, beginning in 1 hour.
The reporters knew Cixin was mute, so no one asked questions. They only murmured to each other as if watching some small animal they had never seen before. Surrounded by people and lenses, the dark, thin West Asian girl opened her eyes wide in fear. Her small body trembled, like a fawn driven into a corner by a pack of hunting dogs. Fortunately, Krell took her hand, pushed out of the encirclement, and boarded the bus bound for the main stadium.
They soon reached the Olympic Stadium. The closing ceremony of the 29th Olympic Games would be held there that evening, and it was also the starting and finishing point of the marathon. After getting off, they were immediately surrounded by still more reporters. Cixin became even more frightened and uneasy, pressing close against Krell. Krell finally managed to escape the harassment and led Cixin into an empty athlete's lounge, shutting outside the noise that had nearly broken her mind.
Krell took a paper cup of water and came to the still terrified Cixin.
In front of her eyes, he opened his other clenched hand. On his palm lay a white pill. Sini stared at the pill for several seconds, then looked at Krell in alarm and shook her head.
Take it,
Krell said in an irresistible tone, then softened his voice. Trust me. It is all right.
Hesitantly, Sini picked up the pill and put it in her mouth. She tasted something sour. She took the water Krell offered and swallowed the pill. A few seconds later, the door of the lounge opened softly. Krell turned sharply and saw a burly figure. He stared at the man for a long time before recognizing him in surprise.
The visitor was General West, the man who had lit the Olympic flame at the opening ceremony. The commander of the 500,000 troops prepared to attack the Republic of West Asia. Now he wore a black suit and held a cardboard box in both hands.
Please leave.
Krell glared at him and said, I would like to talk with Sini. She cannot speak, and she does not understand English. You may translate for me. Thank you. The general bowed slightly to Krell. In his grave voice, there was a force that was hard to resist.
I said please leave,
Krell said, placing himself in front of Sini. The general did not answer. With one powerful arm, he gently moved Krell aside, crouched in front of Sini, and took off one of her running shoes.
What are you doing?
Krell shouted. The general stood and held the running shoe in front of Krell. These were just bought in a Beijing sports shop, were they not? If she runs a marathon in new shoes like these, not custom-made here, her feet will blister before 20 kilometers.
After saying this, he crouched again, took off Sini's other shoe, tossed both shoes aside with a wave of his hand, then picked up the box beside him and opened it, revealing a pair of snow-white running shoes. He held them before Sini.
Child, this is my personal gift to you. A special workshop at Nike made them for you. That workshop can make the best marathon shoes in the world.
Krell then remembered that 3 nights earlier, 2 people claiming to be Nike technicians had come to Sini's room in the Olympic Village and scanned her feet with a 3-dimensional scanner. He could see that this was indeed a top-level pair of marathon shoes. A custom pair like this would cost at least $10,000. The general began putting the shoes on Sini. The marathon is a beautiful sport. I like it very much too. When I was still a lieutenant, I once won a championship at the Army Games. Oh, not the marathon, the triathlon.
After the shoes were on, he smiled and gestured for Sini to stand and try them. Sini stood and walked a few steps. The shoes were light, soft, and elastic, fitting her feet so well they seemed part of her body. The general turned to leave. Krell followed him to the door and said, "Thank you."
The general stopped but did not turn around. To be honest, I would rather the defector had been Sini, not Sari.
That is hard to understand,
Krell said.
Sini's result is the best in West Asia, but in the world she is not even in the top 20, let alone comparable to Emma.
The general kept walking and left one sentence behind. I am afraid of her eyes. Marathon.
The news media had long since called the 29th Olympic Games the Silent Olympics. Sini saw that the vast, empty stadium of the opening ceremony was now covered by a human sea of 100,000 people, yet the silence remained. The silence in this sea of people was the heaviest silence. Sini was not crushed by it, only because the appearance of Emma drew her attention.
The Republic of West Asia's total defeat in the simulated war was already certain. Sari's departure had broken the West Asians spiritually as well. The West Asian sports delegation had disintegrated before their country did. Some officials with money or connections had disappeared. Athletes with nowhere to go shut themselves in their rooms in the Olympic Village, waiting for fate to decide. No one had the spirit to watch the final competition or attend the closing ceremony. When Sini walked toward the starting line, only Krell accompanied her. Under the gaze of 100,000 people, she looked so lonely and weak, like a small dry leaf fallen into a vast playing field, ready to be blown away by the wind at any moment.
In contrast to her pitiful opponent, Frances Emma walked toward the starting line surrounded by attendants. Her coaching team had 5 people, including a famous sports physiologist. Her medical and care team included 6 doctors and nutrition experts. 3 people were responsible only for her shoes and clothing. Emma had truly become a half-human, half-divine star. As early as the 1980s, based on the rate at which the women's marathon record was improving, some had predicted that, aside from shooting, chess, and other non-physical competitions, the marathon would be the first sport in which women surpassed men. 3 years earlier at the Chicago International Marathon, that prediction became reality. Emma set a world best faster than the men's record.
Some male sports commentators sourly argued that this was because men and women raced separately. During that women's race, wind conditions were obviously better than in the men's race. If Scott, the men's champion, had run with them, he would surely have surpassed Emma. That self-comforting myth was shattered at the 2004 Athens Olympics. Men and women ran the entire course together. When Emma reached the finish, she left Scott more than 500 meters behind, and for the first time, lowered the marathon world best below 2 hours. She thereby became the most dazzling sports star at the beginning of the century and was known as the Gazelle of the Earth.
This black girl named Emma had always been the sun in Sini's heart. Among her few pitiful possessions, the one she treasured most was a battered scrapbook containing more than 100 photographs of Emma cut from old newspapers and magazines. Beside her narrow upper bunk in the refugee camp, Sini had pasted a large color sports photo of Emma, a page from a calendar. The previous year, Sini had seen that calendar at a street stall, but she could not afford it. So she waited for someone else to buy it. She followed the buyer and watched the grocery store owner hang the new calendar on the wall beside his counter.
Emma's photograph was on the March page, and Sini waited longingly for 3 months. She often ran to the grocery store, and when no one was watching, lifted the earlier pages for one look at Emma's picture. At dawn on April 1st, she finally received that calendar page, now waste paper, from the shopkeeper. It was the happiest day of her life. Now at the starting line, Sini secretly looked at the opponent standing several meters away. In Sini's eyes, the stadium and the sea of people faded away. Only Emma remained. Sini felt that an invisible halo surrounded her. Within that halo, Emma breathed air from beyond this world and bathed in sunlight from beyond this world. Not a speck of earthly dust could fall on her.
Just then, Krell gave Sini a gentle push, bringing her back to awareness. He said softly, "Do not be frightened by her. She is not as terrifying as you imagine. I have observed her. Her psychological quality is poor."
Hearing this, Sini turned and stared at him with wide eyes. Krell understood what she meant. Yes, she once competed against and defeated the fastest men in the world. But so what? That time she had no pressure. This time is different. This is a race she absolutely cannot lose.
He glanced sideways at Emma and lowered his voice further.
She will certainly use a preemptive tactic. After the start, she will reach top speed and try to shake you off in the first 10 kilometers. Remember, cling to her from the start. Let her consume herself leading. If you can stay with her through the first 20 kilometers, her spirit will collapse.
Sini shook her head in panic. Child, you can do it. That pill will help you. It is a drug that no test can detect, as powerful as nuclear fuel. Do you not feel it? You are already a world champion, child.
At that moment, Sini felt a strange excitement, a fierce desire to release something through running. She looked at Emma again. Emma had finished the long professional warm-up Sini had never seen before and stood beside her behind the starting line. Emma held her head high with pride and never once looked towards Sini, as if Sini did not exist.
At last the starting gun sounded. Sini and Emma ran out side by side, beginning with one steady lap around the field. Wherever they passed, the spectators stood, forming a surging wave of people through the stands. The sound of the crowd rising was like dull thunder from far away, but beyond that, there was no other sound. People watched them run past in silence.
In past training, every time Sini started running, she felt a kind of peace, as if once she ran, she temporarily left this cruel world and entered her own time and space, her paradise. This time, anxiety filled her heart. She longed to finish this lap quickly and enter the world outside the stadium. She longed to reach a place where there was something she wanted, a drug called GMH6.
She was running through the dim corridor of a hospital. The air held the sharp smell of medicine, but she knew the hospital had little medicine left for its patients. Along the corridor, helpless patients sat and lay against the walls. Their groans flashed past her ears and vanished. Mother lay in an equally dim ward at the end of the corridor. Against the dirty sheet of the sickbed, her skin was glaringly white, the white of someone near death. From that skin, tiny beads of blood were seeping. The nurse no longer bothered to wipe them away. The sheet around Mother was wet in a dark red ring. This was the strange disease many people had recently contracted, said to have been caused by a uranium-bearing bomb in the latest air raid.
A moment earlier, the doctor had told Sini that Mother could not be saved. Even if the hospital had that drug, it would only keep her alive a few more days. Sini gestured desperately before the doctor, asking where that drug could still be found. The doctor struggled for a long time before understanding her meaning. It was a drug recently brought by doctors from the United Nations Relief Organization. Perhaps the relief base in the suburbs had it. Sini pulled a sheet of paper and a pencil from her school bag and thrust them together before the doctor. The burning anxiety and longing in her great eyes made the doctor sigh. It was a new Western European drug, without even an official name, only a code.
Forget it, child. That medicine is not for poor people like you. Really, what difference is there between starving to death and dying of illness? All right, I will write it down for you.
Sini ran out through the hospital gate. How tall and magnificent the gate was. Above it burned the sacred flame like a lamp of heaven. She remembered passing through that gate 3 days earlier behind the national flag. Now, where was the athlete's formation of her motherland? What guided her now was not the flag, but Emma, the god in her heart. just as Krell had expected. The moment they left the gate, Emma began accelerating rapidly. She was like a light black feather, carried by a strong wind, Cinny could not feel. Her long legs seemed not to drive her forward, but only to catch the ground and keep her from flying into the air. Cinny struggled to keep up. She had to keep up. Her own 2 feet were driving the wheel of Mother's life. Was this the avenue of the capital?
When had it become so wide? Beside it stood splendid high buildings and green lawns, yet there were no bomb craters. On both sides of the road were seas of people, clean and pale, clearly people who could eat their fill. She wanted to catch a ride, but the city was under martial law that day because of an air raid, and there were almost no cars on the road. It seemed there was only the guide car flickering in and out ahead of Emma, with several cameras on it aimed at the 2 runners. Deep in her consciousness, Cinny knew she could not ride in that car. The reason?
It was very clear. She had already been there. She had already run to the United Nations relief base. In a white building, she showed the doctors the paper with the drug name written on it. Oh no, a doctor who spoke West Asian said to her, "No, this drug is not part of the relief supplies. You need to buy it. Oh, of course you cannot afford it. I cannot afford it either." Then, Emma, why are you still running? I cannot get that medicine. Mother, of course, we must keep running. We must hurry back to Mother. Let her see me one last time. Let me see her one last time. At this thought, the fire of anxiety burned again in Cinny's heart. Unconsciously, she accelerated, caught Emma, and almost passed her. Let her consume herself leading.
Cinny remembered Krell's instruction and slowed again to follow behind Emma. Emma sensed Cinny's move and immediately began a second acceleration. They had already run 5 kilometers, and this West Asian child had not been shaken off. Emma grew somewhat angry. The gazelle of the earth showed her mad side, burning like a black flame in front of Cinny. Cinny accelerated too. She had to keep up with Emma. She hoped Emma would go faster. She wanted Mother. Ah, no, the road was wrong. Where was Emma going? What was that great needle piercing the sky in the distance? A television tower. The capital's television tower seemed to have been bombed down long ago.
But wherever they were going, she had to follow Emma, follow the God in her heart. She knew Mother was no longer alive.
Cinny, covered with dirt and sweat, pushed open the ward door and saw Mother's lifeless body covered by a white sheet. 2 people were trying to remove the body, but Cinny, like a crazed little beast, blocked them. So they had no choice but to stop. The doctor who had written the drug name for her said,
"All right, child. You may stay here with your mother for 1 night. Tomorrow we will arrange her funeral, and then you must leave. I know you have nowhere to go, but this is a hospital, child. It is not easy for anyone now."
So Cinny sat quietly beside Mother's body, watching a few bloodstains appear on the white sheet. Later, pale moonlight shone in through the window, and the bloodstains turned black in the moonlight. After some unknown time, the moonlight had moved to the wall. Someone entered and turned on the light. Cinny did not look at him. She only felt him come over and take her hand. Those rough hands pressed her wrist and remained still for a while. She heard the man say,
52 beats. Her hand was gently set down. The man spoke again.
"Before dark, I watched from upstairs as you ran past in the distance.
They said you had gone to the relief base. There were no cars today, so you must have run there. There and back, about 20 kilometers, and it took you only a little more than an hour, including the time you lost inside the relief base. Yet, your heartbeat has already recovered to 52 beats per minute. Sini, I had noticed you before. Now this confirms your gift. Do you not remember me? I am Sturm Oka, a physical education teacher. I taught your class. You did not come to school this semester because of your mother's illness? Oh, when your mother died, my grandson was born upstairs. Sini, life is like that. People come and go in a hurry.
Do you really want to be like your mother, struggling in poverty all your life, and then leave the world so miserably? The last sentence touched Sini. She finally woke from her trance, looked at Akka, recognized this lean middle-aged man, and slowly shook her head.
Good child, you can live another kind of life. You can stand on the podium at the center of a magnificent Olympic arena. People all over the world will look at you with respect, and the flag of our suffering motherland will rise because of you.
No light shone from Sini's eyes, but she listened very attentively. The key is this. Are you prepared to suffer? Sini nodded. I know you have always suffered, but the suffering I mean is different, child. It is something ordinary people cannot endure. Are you certain you can endure it?
Sini stood and nodded more firmly. Good, Sini. Come with me.
Emma maintained a constant high speed, her movements precise and uniform, like a program entering a dead loop, like a machine racing forward. Sini also wanted to turn herself into a machine, but it was impossible. She was searching for the next destination, and the destination had vanished, terrifying her. Yet she held on. She actually kept up with the gazelle of the earth. She knew the miraculous pill was working. She could feel it burning in her blood vessels, giving her endless energy. The course turned 90 degrees, and they ran onto the world's broadest avenue, called Chang'an Avenue. It should have been wider, because the two sides of the road should have been boundless desert.
During several years of training, never less than 20 kilometers every day, Sini's favorite place was this road outside the city. Every day, the distant desert looked smooth and soft in the dark color of morning, and the blue-gray road stretched straight toward the horizon. The world seemed extremely simple, and she was the only person in it. Even the sun rising at the end of the road seemed to belong to her alone. Although training was harsh in those days, Sini lived happily. Men and women who passed her all turned back to look. They were surprised to find that the mute girl's face was actually rosy. Compared with the uniformly sallow faces of other girls, she, though not beautiful, became much more moving.
Sini herself was surprised that in this hungry country she could actually eat her fill. Aka settled her in an empty teacher's dormitory at the school. Every day he personally brought her food. Staples such as bread and potatoes were unlimited, which was already very good, and from time to time there were nutrients such as cheese, beef, mutton, and eggs. Such things could only be bought on the black market, and were as expensive as gold. Sini did not know where Oka got so much money. As a teacher, his monthly salary was not enough for him to eat his fill for 1 week. Sini asked several times, but he always pretended not to understand her sign language.
At the other end of the Asian continent, the Republic of West Asia was already on the edge of disintegration. The government was paralyzed. Those declared war criminals had begun fleeing. Ordinary citizens waited numbly. A few people still watching the Olympic marathon broadcast began to spread the news, and more people returned to televisions and radios.
The road grew wider, so wide that Sini could hardly believe it. She knew she was running across the largest square in the world.
To the left stood a splendid ancient Eastern building of gold and color. She knew that behind it was the grand palace of an ancient empire. To the right of the square flew the flag of this vast country, both ancient and young. At first, Sini had thought it was a kingdom, but people told her it too was a republic, and that it had endured even greater suffering than her own republic. Then she saw a red marker slide past her, reading
21 kilometers.
The half-marathon had passed, and Sini still stayed close behind Emma. Emma looked back at Sini. It was the first time she had truly looked at her opponent. Sini caught that look and was deeply shocked. The arrogance in those eyes had vanished. What Sini saw there was fear. In her heart, Sini cried out, "Emma, my God, what are you afraid of? I must keep up with you." Even though the road had no destination, Sini had something to flee. She had to run from the people in Teacher Oka's family. They were waiting for her at the school. They had pushed Oka to her room. Among them were Oka's wife holding a baby, his 3 brothers, and several other relatives Sini did not know.
They pointed at Sini and angrily questioned Oka. "Where did you get this wild child?" Oka said she was a marathon genius. They said Oka was a bastard, in an age when people starve to death every day, who still thinks of the marathon. "We all know you are an incurable dreamer, but you should not have sold that old edition of the Quran. Its words were written in gold dust, and it was very valuable, an ancestral treasure the whole family had not borne to sell despite starving for so long. Yet you used that money to let this little mute live like a princess. Your own grandson has no milk to drink. Did you not hear him crying all night?"
Look how thin he is. Later rumors said that Sini was the illegitimate child of Akka and Weena, Sini's mother. At first, this claim seemed untenable because for several years before and after Sini's birth, Weena had been living in a northern city, and this could be verified. During that time, Oka, as a second lieutenant in the army, was fighting in the south in the First West Asian War and had even been wounded. But then other rumors said Oka's war record was a colossal lie he had invented himself. He had never taken part in the war and had never been to the Southern Front. During the First War, he had in fact spent the time with Weena in the north.
30 kilometers. Sini still stayed close behind Emma. News of the race spread, and the whole world watched. 2 camera helicopters appeared in the sky. In the Republic of West Asia, everyone gathered before televisions and radios, holding their breath as they followed this final marathon.
Now anemia from lack of oxygen had turned the world in Sini's eyes into a mass of black fog. She felt her heartbeat like a chain of explosions, each one bringing sharp pain to her chest. The earth was like cotton. When her feet landed, there was no support. She knew the effect of the pill had passed. Golden sparks emerged from the black fog. The sparks joined into one mass. It was the Olympic flame. My fire is going out, Sini thought. It is going out. General West appeared holding the torch, smiling like a father. Sini, if you want the fire not to go out, you must set yourself alight. Do you want to burn yourself? Light me, Sini shouted. The general stretched the torch toward her, and Sini felt herself ignite with a roar.
That night, Sini packed her simple belongings and went to Oka's room in the teacher's dormitory. He had moved out of his home several days earlier. In sign language, Sini said, "I am leaving. Teacher, go home and let your little grandson have milk." Oka shook his head. His hair had turned gray in the past few days. "Sini, you know this is our common cause. Must you go? Do you still think there is no reason for what I have done for you? All right, I will give you a reason. What they say is true. I am your father. I am only atoning for my sin."
Sini had half believed and half doubted those rumors. But when she heard Aka's words, she believed them completely. She did not throw herself into her father's arms and cry. He owed too much to her and her mother, and this let her accept the fact calmly. Even so, it was the happiest moment of Sini's life. After all, she had a father.
At this moment, the crying of a girl faintly reached her. It was Emma. It was actually Emma. She was crying as she ran, speaking brokenly. The words were simple, and with Sini's first-year middle school education, she could understand almost all of them.
God, what should I do? Tell me, what should I do?
At that moment, Sini almost pitied her. My God, you must keep running. Without you, what should I do? I do not know the destination. Emma received an answer. The voice came from the miniature earpiece in her right ear. It was not God. It was her head coach.
Do not be afraid. We can be certain she has exhausted her strength. She is running on will now, while you still have great reserves. What you need is to calm down. Listen, Emma. Slow down and let her lead.
When Emma slowed, Sini felt a brief excitement. But when she realized Emma was staying close behind her, she understood that she had met a fatal tactic. Sini now had only 3 choices. First, slow down with her opponent and form a situation in which the two ran side by side at low speed. This would let Emma recover both physically and psychologically. Second, keep leading at the current speed. This would let Emma recover psychologically, which was what she needed most at the moment. Either choice would restore Emma's superlative fighting power as a marathon superstar, and in the duel over the final distance, Sini would certainly lose. The only hope of victory was the third choice: accelerate rapidly and shake off her opponent.
With Sini's current, already exhausted strength, success was almost impossible. But she still made that choice and began to accelerate. Even for an experienced distance runner, leading is a heavy psychological burden. For precisely that reason, during most of a marathon, contestants form several groups and move side by side at agreed speeds. If someone in a group provokes the others and starts to accelerate, unless that person is sure of finally shaking off the opponents, she can only become the leader, the stepping stone on which the followers walk toward victory.
Sini, however, had almost no race experience. When the road ahead unfolded before her without cover, and the hot summer wind struck her face, she was like a person swimming through the ocean behind a small boat, when the boat suddenly vanished, leaving only herself floating in endless waves. She urgently needed a psychological support, a destination, or a purpose. She found it. She was going to her father.
Oka sent Sini to an unemployed track and field coach in the suburbs and asked the coach to guide her training for a while. 5 days later, Sini received the news of her father's death. She returned at once and received only Sturm Oka's urn. During those last days, Sini had watched her father's body grow weaker day by day, but she had not known that this phase of her training had been supported by his selling blood. After Sini left, Oka suddenly collapsed during a physical education class and never stood up again. As on the night her mother died, Sini sat quietly in that small room at the school, pale moonlight shining through the window onto her father's ashes.
But not much time passed before the door was forced open. Oka's wife and those relatives burst in, demanding to know what Oka had left Sini while rummaging through the room. The old principal of the school followed them in and scolded them not to behave wildly. At that moment, someone found under Sini's pillow a new sports shirt Oka had left her. A pocket had been sewn inside it. When they tore open the pocket, they took out an envelope marked as Sini's inheritance. It seemed Oka had long realized his body would not hold out much longer. The old principal snatched the envelope and said Sini was teacher Oka's daughter and had the right to receive it.
While the two sides argued, Oka's wife held the urn to her ear and shook it again and again, saying there seemed to be some metal thing inside, surely a wedding ring. Before her words had fallen, the urn was snatched away. The white ashes were poured across the table, and the crowd searched through them. Sini screamed and threw herself forward, but was pushed to the ground. When she crawled up and threw herself forward again, someone had found the piece of metal in the ashes, but he immediately tossed it to the floor. His hand had been cut, and blood flowed in a vivid line across his ash-covered palm. The old principal carefully picked the thing up from the floor. It was a small diamond-shaped metal fragment with extremely sharp points. He told everyone it was shrapnel from a hand grenade.
My God, so Oka really had fought in the South? Someone cried. After a silence, they understood what it meant. Sini, Oka is not your father, and you are not his daughter. You have no right to inherit his estate. The principal tore open the envelope and said, "Let us see what teacher Oka left." From the envelope, he drew out a blank sheet of paper. Under everyone's gaze, he stared at the paper for a full 3 minutes, then solemnly said,
"A generous inheritance." Oka's wife snatched the paper from his hand. The old principal then spoke the second half of the sentence. "Unfortunately, only Sini can receive it."
The crowd stared at the paper for a long time, too. Finally, Oka's wife looked at Sini in confusion and handed the paper to her. Sini saw that there were only a few words on it, written by the teacher and coach, who was not her father, but whose daughter she was willing to become. He had used the last of his life's strength to write them. The strokes pressed deep through the page.
Glory in dreams.
Sini ran 3 kilometers at her absolute limit and failed to shake off Emma. During this time, with a leader to rely on, Emma's mind stabilized. She changed from a panicked girl back into a marathon superstar. The gazelle of the earth awakened her sleeping strength and began to counterattack. After a mad acceleration, she passed Sini and quickly widened the gap. Watching Emma's back gradually vanish, the exhausted Sini knew everything was over. The 35-kilometer marker appeared. 7 kilometers remained, and to Sini that distance was infinite. She seemed to be running through slime. Her speed quickly fell, finally becoming almost a walk.
Then she saw the West Asian sports delegation in the roadside crowd. Her companions were shouting to her. She could not hear the sound, but from their mouth shapes, she saw what they were shouting. "Sini, run it to the end."
Sini saw Krell. He waved both fists at her desperately. In one hand he clenched a little medicine bottle. The pill of divine strength he had given Sini had come from that bottle. It was only a bottle of vitamin C.
Ahead, in the crowds on both sides of the road, Sini saw everyone pointing toward the upper left, forming a forest of arms. They were pointing at a huge screen beside the road. Sini looked up and recognized the place on the screen. Heroes Square in the capital of the Republic of West Asia, where she began her training every morning. Now the square was a boiling sea of people. The camera moved closer, and she recognized every mouth shape again. Hundreds of thousands of her compatriots were shouting together.
Cini, run it to the end. Then Cini heard sound. It came from the spectators on both sides. In a short time, thousands upon thousands of Chinese people had somehow learned a sentence in West Asian. The silence of these Olympic Games was broken. They shouted in unison, Cini, run it to the end.
Black fog covered Cini's eyes again. General West appeared in the fog, holding an extinguished torch. Cini, your sacred flame is going out. You have burned yourself empty. A mass of red light appeared. Oka stood, holding a burning torch. No, child, there are still things that can burn. Do you remember the inheritance I left you? West smiled and shook his head. Do not burn any more, Cini. You are not Joan of Arc. Everything has failed. If you burn everything away, you will get nothing. Oka waved the torch, and the flame roared. No, child, because of you, the divided motherland is joining together again. Your sacred flame cannot go out. Cini shouted to Oka, light it. Oka stretched the torch in his hand toward her.
With a thunderous roar, glory and dreams burst into flame.
After Emma crossed the finish line, the 100,000 people in the stadium waited silently. Now Beijing's sky was dark with storm clouds, thunder, and lightning. Lightning struck the stadium's lightning rods twice, exploding into dazzling balls of fire. 10 minutes later, Cini entered the stadium, circled the field once with heavy steps, crossed the finish line, and fell to the ground. 100,000 people stood at the same time, watching with the whole world the small figure lying still in the stadium. In the dead silence, only the Olympic flame roared in the fierce wind before the rainstorm. When people covered Cini's lifeless body with an Olympic flag and the flag of the Republic of West Asia, they were astonished to find that she was smiling.
She had fulfilled her glory and dreams, the country that ran to the end.
These great Olympic Games mark the beginning of a new era. Peace window will make humanity finally abandon barbarism and enter true civilization. Humanity's moral level will rise in step with technological progress. This day has come too late, but at last it has come. From now on, a nation's level of sport will be an important sign of its national power, and the highest level of competitive sport rests on the popularization of sport among all the people. Therefore, all nations will transfer the enormous expenditures once used for armaments toward improving the health of their peoples. A new, healthier, more civilized form of social life and international politics will emerge. The ideal society of universal human unity remains far away, but its light has already reached us.
This speech was delivered by the President of the International Olympic Committee on a special flight to the Republic of West Asia. He and the other main members of the IOC were going to West Asia to celebrate the first success of the Peace Window Plan. On the same aircraft were the West Asian sports delegation returning from Beijing and some members of the American sports delegation. The latter had all competed, had won Olympic gold medals, and had received the Medal of Freedom from the President, so they all looked radiant with honor.
The IOC president pointed toward the American delegation and said, "You are the noblest victors in the history of human warfare. I believe the people of West Asia released from suffering will welcome you as heroes. He turned again toward the West Asian delegation.
Nor are you losers. These Olympic Games have no losers. You are all warriors through whom humanity defeated barbarism. Through sport, you won peace for the world. The athletes of the two countries shook hands with each other. At first it was reluctant, but later everyone embraced in tears.
At that moment the captain came over and announced to everyone with a grave expression, "Gentlemen, West Asian airspace has been declared a flight danger zone. Please decide quickly whether we should land in a neighboring country or return to Beijing." Everyone looked at him, at a loss.
The full military strike against West Asia has begun. The first wave of air raids is now underway. It took people a long time to understand the meaning of his words. You have broken faith.
A West Asian athlete roared, pointing at the American delegation. Krell stood and restrained the impulsive West Asian athletes. Everyone, calm down. I think the ones who broke faith may be us West Asians.
Yes, the captain said. According to the information we have just received, the multinational force that took control of the capital under the Peace Window Agreement has encountered fierce resistance.
But the West Asian army had already been disbanded, and all heavy weapons had been collected.
The IOC president said, "But light weapons were scattered among the people. Now if a gust of wind blew all the roofs off West Asia, you would see a gunman at every window. Why?" The IOC president wept like rain, seized Krell, and said in agitation,
"Your cities will become seas of fire. Your people will bleed like rivers. Mothers will lose children, children will lose fathers, and the survivors will search for food in garbage heaps. And in the end, you are still doomed to total defeat. Every result will be the same."
That is fate, then. Krell smiled at the president, then turned to everyone. In fact, I foresaw this long ago. The Peace Window Plan was only a beautiful fairy tale. Competition cannot replace war, just as wine cannot replace blood. He walked to the porthole and looked at the sea of clouds outside.
As for the Republic of West Asia, it is only like Sini. It merely wants to run to the end. After many twists and turns, Alexari returned to his war-torn motherland 1 week after the war began.
After the Olympic closing ceremony, Sari had stood for a long time in the thunderstorm-soaked stands. He stared at the place where Sini had fallen, and at last said to himself, "I should go home after all."
The battle to defend the capital was in its final stage. Most of the city had fallen. Although the overall situation was hopeless, reinforcement units from other regions still streamed into the districts where fighting continued. These units were composed of all kinds of people, some in uniform, more of them civilians carrying guns. Sari asked an officer for a submachine gun. The man recognized him and said with a smile,
"We cannot afford to hire a savior."
No, an ordinary soldier.
Sari smiled, took the gun, and joined the column singing the national anthem. Under a night sky half reddened by firelight, over trembling ground, he walked toward the city where battle raged. March 7, 2003, at Niangsiguan,